Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. Today is another Bible study with us, and today's Bible study is coming from Jonah chapter 2. If you weren't with us last week, then you missed Jonah chapter 1. You can go back and watch that if you want.
We are going through the whole book of Jonah. It is like a series that we're going to be doing, and we're
4 videos worth.
Yes, 4 videos worth, and we are in chapter 2, which is Jonah's prayer. So I'm going to read it to you.
She's going to include verse 17 from chapter 1 because it kind of sets the stage. Yeah.
So verse 17 says, "And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights." Now chapter 2. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, saying, "I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me, and your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight, yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped around my head at the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. When my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. But I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord." And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land.
Now we are going to go over it in more details. For verse 17, it's kind of interesting because it points out the word appointed, that the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And the commentary in here says that that points to God's sovereignty over all creation, that he can manage and make things do as he pleases whenever he pleases. Then as far as the term fish goes, which we've always heard is whale, but in the Bible it says fish, and that is just like a generic term. It says kind of in this, it talks about how in this time it might have been a general word for aquatic beast. Makes you think big, and then the fact that a man fit inside of its belly makes you think big too. So it had to be of some sort of great size.
It's the megalodon.
What is that?
You ain't never heard of the megalodon? It's a ginormous shark.
Mm-mm.
With a humongous mouth. Like...
She's crazy. Also, the commentary in this kind of links 3 days and 3 nights to like Jesus's death and resurrection, but there's nothing really any further to point to that. It might just be a specific, he was there for 3 days kind of thing, but it does mention that there could be a connection there, I guess. Verse 1 and 2 from chapter 2 say, "Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice." So
in verses 1 and 2, Jonah is thanking God for saving him, and when it says Sheol, that means out of the realms of death. So he is thanking God for saving him from death.
So it's kind of signifying like his near-death experience. You would have thought you were dead.
Like, yeah, if you were in a giant fish, you would think you were dead.
Yeah.
You'd
That would be scary. I'd say it was a pretty eye-opening experience.
Verses 3 and 4 say, "For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight, yet I shall again look upon your holy temple."
So he says, "For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the sea." And technically the sailors cast him overboard, but he knows that God's the ultimate reason for that. So then verse 4, where he talks about he is driven away from God's sight, but then he turns again and looks upon his holy temple. To me, that just kind of reminds me of how when we recognize that we do wrong, we realize that there's a separation there from God. Then we turn away from that and humble ourselves and turn back to God. That kind of just resonates with me and how we are like Jonah, very much like Jonah. 5 says, the water closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped about my head.
Verse 5, Jonah is saying things from what he remembers. Either while he was in the fish or before he got swallowed by the fish. It doesn't really specify. He is in the belly of the fish when he is saying these things. So a continuation of 5, 6 goes on to say, at the roots of the mountains, I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. When my life was fading away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple.
So in verse 6, he's just kind of speaking to how far down he went and how close to death that he was.
In verse 7, it's kind of like whenever someone gets to the lowest low in their life, and that's when they reach out to the Lord for help.
He's thankful that whenever he was at that low, that even though he didn't deserve God's grace, that God gave him that grace and saved him from death. Verses 8 and 9 say, those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. But I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord.
So I'm going to read the commentary for verses 8 and 9. Those who pay regard to vain idols refers to the pagan sailors who prayed each to his own god, but is also a message to Jonah's idolatrous fellow Israelites. Ironically, these sailors ended up experiencing God's steadfast love while Jonah ended up in the sea. Salvation belongs to the Lord is Jonah's confession that God is the sovereign source of salvation. The rest of the story will show that Jonah believes God is free to save any as long as they are us and not them.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
See 4, 1 through 4. But it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was angry. Oh, because Jonah didn't want the Ninevites to be saved. That's what it's talking about. Then whenever it's talking about salvation in chapter 8, kind of like the commentary said, Jonah was good with salvation being available to all those who he thought were good enough to obtain salvation. And he was not thinking of the Ninevites.
Verse 10 says, and the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land.
So where it says that he vomited Jonah upon the dry land, it is kind of like a term of disgust, like God was displeased with Jonah's actions. But he did deliver Jonah, so that still shows God's favor for Jonah. And God knows Jonah's heart and knows that he doesn't want to go and warn the Ninevites. Kind of like with us, he can see our hearts and he knows all the wrong about them. Then he can still see that little bit that he can use in us. So as much as it pains us to admit that we're kind of like Jonah, it's nice to read a story like this and realize that God is still willing to use people who don't always have the best intentions, or sometimes have selfish intentions, or have a hard time feeling like there are other groups of people who are unworthy of God's salvation.
With that being said, it is good to know that even though we might not know God's intentions for us, and we might go down the wrong path, God will bring us back to where we are supposed to be.
There's kind of like a security in that ultimately we can't mess up God's plan for our life.
So that is all for this Bible study.
And what we got out of it.
Be sure to come back every Monday. We do a Bible study on every Monday, and then on Wednesdays we do faith-based videos, and right now we are in the book Anxious for Nothing by John MacArthur. On Fridays we do fun videos. You never know what you're gonna get. You might get food, you might get makeup, you might get some kind of fashion.
DIYs, crafty stuff. Other than that, we hope you guys have a good day, have a good week, and don't forget to shine. We'll see you in the next one. Bye!